It's been so endearing for me to create something that's part of the solution. We talk so much about the problem, and I really want to be a part of the solution. So how can you be a part of the solution?
Welcome to Vet Life Reimagined, where we share stories of the possibilities in veterinary medicine. Veterinary technicians have been much in conversation about their roles in the profession and the sustainability of the career path. The story of our guest, Jacklyn Phillips, highlights some insights and how we can address these topics. In her career, she's had diverse job experiences and dealt with a lack of career growth, poor fitting roles, and financial concerns. To stay in the veterinary industry, she decided to make some choices and take a few risks. Her story delves into the importance of dealing with burnout, taking some risky steps, and ultimately founding a relief veterinary technician service that employs over 40 veterinary technicians. Key insights include empowering mindset shifts, maintaining healthy boundaries, and fostering a supportive work culture. And after the gratitude question at the end, Jacqueline also explains what she does to keep a healthy body and mental health, which is worth checking in to see if there are opportunities to do more to support ourselves better. Now, let's get to the conversation with Jacklyn Phillips at the beginning of her interest in veterinary medicine.
So I definitely grew up with animals. I grew up with riding, training horses, showing. We always had cats, dogs. But yeah, I didn't know that I wanted to work in veterinary medicine. I actually, right out of high school, I went to massage therapy school, had kind of a value for holistics and naturopathic healing. And I did kind of have an entrepreneurial spirit maybe at that time too, because I kind of saw that as an opportunity to travel and work for myself and, build something for myself. However, I was not mature enough to take that as a serious profession. At the time, I was like 19, 19, 20. But that program had an animal massage program. So you went through Swedish massage certification, which is what I did. And then the next level is the deep tissue massage, which qualifies you for working on animals. And, I still had like my passion for horses. And I thought, well, maybe I could do something with that. But again, I was way too young and immature to take that as a serious course. And my aunt, her veterinarian, who she takes her horses to, needed somebody that had horsemanship because large percent, maybe 70% of his business was race horses. And so I was qualified in the sense of knowing my way around a horse, but I didn't have any vet med experience. So I was trained on that job. There was a small animal practice with that as well. So I got some cat dog stuff. And then that kind of led me into being an assistant for 4 years before I decided that I wanted to be a technician. And it was kind of like, not that I was forced into being a technician, but it was a clinic that I worked in that, wasn't allowing assistants to run anesthesia or do certain tasks. They wanted only their licensed technicians. And so I was like, well, that's it. I don't want to be limited in what I can do. So I went to school after 4 years of being an assistant.
And just to back up a little bit, it's something that I tell people who are also trained to get into vet school is get experience with lots of different animals, because sometimes just being comfortable around some of these animals is huge. Because I went to vet school with some people who had never been around horses, and they're large animals. They can be intimidating. And so, that's neat that you are able to take that and be able to start getting into veterinary medicine that way. And then just, working with racehorses too. I don't know if a lot of people get that experience. Do you have any fun stories that you remember or something that was kind of unique about working with racehorses in particular?
Yeah, a lot of them are dangerous.
Yeah,
they're true. Not a lot of them, but there was each barn that we went into, you knew which horses you couldn't touch, basically. They had to be heavily sedated. But I got exposed to a lot of things. He was a full blown, did any kind of surgery, did tendon type surgeries, pallets, Caslicks. Of course, we did gelds in the barns and everything. But I got exposed to a lot of anesthesia in equine that I probably wouldn't have got anywhere else. Joint injections, ultrasounds, x-rays. We were out in the field doing all of those things. It was high labor, and I was glad that I was in my 20s for that, where my body can sustain that kind of labor, because I don't know that I could sustain that for, 10 years. the veterinarian had been doing it for 30.
Yeah,
Had his face broken before, had his leg broken before, like he had his wear and tear, but was still out there doing it.
Man, we've got some hardy people in our profession. Now, is that something that kind of interests you about maybe leaning more into the small animal side of the practice? Was wow, that's a lot of physical labor. How did you decide to kind of stay a little bit more on the small animal side after your love and experience with horses?
Not necessarily. Like I definitely enjoyed the equine side and I would have continued, but it was just a matter of location. So I moved through my 20s. I moved about once a year. I lived in Florida. I lived in Tennessee. And so it was a matter of what market I was working in as far as a big city didn't have, really an equine doctor or large animal demands. So I just kind of fell into small animal. I had a little bit of experience with working with that first clinic. And then again, I was just trained on the job for more small animal specifics. So no, I mean, I think I would have continued with the equine because I really did enjoy it. And it was nice to be outside too.
Yeah.
That's part of the job.
That's interesting. And so you said you were with a vet clinic and you wanted to be able to do more in that setting. So you decided to go and get your associate's degree in veterinary technology. And you went to school during the day and worked ER at night. That's a lot. So how were those years kind of getting through school? What did you enjoy about school? Were you able to really apply that in practice? What were you kind of learning during that time?
I'll be honest. I hate school. I hated every part of it. I've never really enjoyed school. I'm more on the practical side of I definitely can learn anything on the job. And yes, it was essential in tying together a lot of what I knew on the job. And, there's pharmaceuticals that we need to learn about, anesthesia, microbiology. There's a lot of the same courses that you take as a veterinarian, lab animal, a lot of that it was essential for my career path for sure. But yeah, I did. I fell into ER that way because I needed a job. I was supporting myself through school. And that's where I fell into ER is my jam. It was something different coming through the door every hour, every 5 minutes sometimes. And the sense of urgency and the different types of cases, you see cardio cases, you see internal medicine cases, neurology. So I was learning a lot still on the job. And it was never a dull moment in that sense where I was consistently stimulated in that way. And I really do love emergency.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being honest about school. I also did not love going through vet school. You don't have to just love every moment of everything. That's okay too. So you started to really find something you're enjoying with the ER setting. And so you did start to work with different veterinary clinics. And it also looked like you were starting to rise up. You were getting supervisor roles and things like that. So was that kind of the expected path that you felt like you needed to go? Or how did you feel during that time in building your career and trying to find things that you continued to enjoy?
Not necessarily in the supervisor role that I saw myself. I definitely had a goal. I wanted to work in academia, in a teaching environment. I enjoyed learning and teaching in that sense of when I became, more advanced in my skill and able to mentor others. I was at the first emergency clinic that I worked at. I was there for 7 years. So I grew up there because I did. It was through my 20s, maturity wise, and in my path as being a technician. So I was a senior tech in that way. But as far as being a supervisor, I didn't necessarily see that. If there's anything, I definitely have a very strong work ethic. There's a hustle that I bring to every clinic. And I think that translates into leadership a lot of times. And I do think it is part of leadership, having a strong work ethic, having radar on the team that you're working with, the cases that are going on, especially in emergency where there's a lot going on at once, having that radar and being able to delegate, but also I'm there in the trenches with you. I'm not going to ask you to do something that I wouldn't do myself. And I think every team that I've worked with knows that. So it did put me in a promotional role in a couple different clinics following that, which was it was good for me. I think there's sometimes, I think it happens a lot to veterinary technicians that are either skilled or have strong work ethics that, oh, you're really great at your job. Here, be a manager. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a good manager. And I'm not saying that as a bad manager, but I'm saying it's exhausting in the sense of you no longer get to be just a great technician on the floor. When I worked at NC State, I was both. I was a technician on the floor as well as a supervisor. And that was important to me to be both, because in order to manage people, I need to know what's going on the floor. And to build a team, I need to know how we all work together. But ultimately, it did burn me out entirely too from the clinical space.
And I mean, I loved how you were highlighting a lot of these skills that are important in leadership that maybe sometimes people forget. It's one, starting with the work that you put forth, and people really respect somebody who's willing to do the work and to take people along with them. And so it's super important, any type of leadership position. And I did want to ask a question, and this is really to help other people that may not love a school environment for them. But you mentioned but I love to teach and I love to learn.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you explain the difference between going through a vet tech program, like getting your associate's degree, versus working in academia or as a mentor, as someone who enjoys both learning as well as teaching others? How can you explain the difference in what you were finding that you were enjoying in the more mentorship aspect compared to going through school?
Because it's practical, because it's hands-on, because it's directly with the patient versus me learning through a book and through a lecture is not my style of learning. I don't retain in that way. But if I can put it into a practical sense of here's our patient that's presenting with XYZ, and here are the steps that our doctor has given us to treat this patient, I find it connects a lot better. And that's not for everyone, right? Some people are really intimidated by that, or they need to go read about something before they can implement. But that was my personal way of retaining and being able to teach is here we have this and here's how we do it. And to be able to see it through, as some of the clinics, the emergency clinics that I worked in, that they didn't go to a separate ward for ICU. It was you were ER and ICU, and you see the case all the way through.
Yep. That's how I did ER too. From school to even in my internship when it was primarily ER, it was just everything is there and you're watching that case the whole time, and you learn a lot for sure. And I think that's important to know. That's part of self-awareness, is also knowing how you learn and how you enjoy things and retain things. And luckily, the more programs that we have, both on the veterinary technician side as well as the veterinarian side, there are different ways of learning. Certain schools may have a different approach. And I think that's important to know how you learn best yourself so you can set yourself up in those scenarios. So I think that is really important, not only for school, but also in your career as well. These are the things that we're trying to figure out so we can find the places that we are going to thrive. And you said that, and some of that may come with the work ethic and the hustle that you talked about, which is also describing of a very common entrepreneur trait as well, but it started to wear on you. And so what did you do when you were starting to notice, what were some of the things that you were starting to feel? And then what did you do about that so you could find the next step for you?
Definitely separate from being a technician on the floor. I think there's burnout that happens on the floor, right, as a veterinary technician. And a lot of those are either having to work overtime or being short-staffed and just having too many cases per one person can contribute where you don't feel like you're doing enough for each patient, or there's not enough patient care. And that will burn you out, I think, ethically or morally in my heart. I feel bad for that patient. I don't go home feeling good about that. Otherwise, as a manager or supervisor, understanding that you will never please everyone. And regardless of how much effort you're putting into, making everyone happy, you just never will. And I think accepting that and being able to like separate yourself from being pure in your intentions and in believing like that you are doing the best you can for everyone and doing that, it still wears on you. Like, we're still human, right? The hours too, I think there needs to be boundaries. Like, as a supervisor, I did care for my team to where it's like they needed time off, but I didn't have anybody else to cover them. So I would cover their shift. And, that's kind of a mistake that we make sometimes as managers, where we overwork ourselves for our team. So there's a balance, right? Money is a factor. What we're compensated sometimes isn't enough. And that was kind of part of my burnout as well, is like I was working really hard and working a lot of hours, but not saving a lot of money for my future. So between the two of like the hours and the work of being a manager and never pleasing everyone, it was just an unhappiness. And whereas unfulfilled in my role, and then the money part of I'm not saving for my future, then I transitioned out of the clinical space.
So where did you go? You left the clinics. You were starting to see all these signs. So what did you do next?
I went into sales because that's where the money is, right? Or that's what I knew as the money was in our industry, I guess. So I went into medical device sales and I sold EO gas sterilizers for almost 2.5 years that I worked for them. And I did really well because 70% of their business is the veterinary space. And I know how the clinics operate. I know their instrumentation. So I could speak their language. They also had the opportunities for me to teach about their processes and how that technology works. And that was very fulfilling to me, to be able to go into different college spaces and teach about the technology of those things. So, but it didn't fill my soul, the clinical part still, like, I missed patient care. I missed the intelligence behind like working in really smart teams that are saving lives. So sterilizers are very, very narrow in how broad we go in our knowledge, I guess. And then I bagged another startup company that was doing laparoscopic surgery and endoscopy. I bagged him for a job for 6 months, and I would have been his first employee. And I worked for him for 6 months. And that was where I thought could be a perfect balance of sales and teaching, because we were also teaching the instrumentation of how to do laparoscopic space and crypt orchids and liver biopsies. And so it would put me back in as a technician. However, I wasn't a technician in that job. So it was hard for me to separate myself as seeing certain things that I knew as a technician could be either done differently or optimized in patient care, but it wasn't my job and I really had to hold back. And that was difficult because I was the salesperson, right? And I was there to teach the doctors how to do the instrumentation. So after 6 months of that, it was a peaceful parting. And then I was without a job for the first time in my entire adult life. But I was okay because I had money saved up that I had earned. And then it was a matter of kind of soul searching of like, what's next?
I think we need that space sometimes. If your mind is in a survival mode, that's all it can think about, the very basics to survive. And you don't really have the ability to think bigger about like, what do I like? Where can I go? What are the possibilities? It's really hard to think about possibilities when you're in survival mode. And so it really sets you up for giving you a time to take a breath and kind of discover more about yourself and what you wanted to do and how you would kind of combine all these things that you were learning into something. So do you mind sharing your thought process, kind of going through that and then how that led to actually starting your own business?
Yes, I think taking the risk on those things, I mean, it was risky, especially, going from a very stable, working with the sterilizer company and then going to work with the startup that I was the first employee and not really, defined in the job description. It was risky, but it was worth it for me to try different things to see where those things lined up. And even though that didn't fill my soul, like I was very grateful for those opportunities. And I think every decision I've made in my path has led me exactly where I need to be. In that time that I didn't have a job, but I was financially okay. Like I didn't sit still. I had some odd jobs. I was helping a friend with landscaping. I was doing some pet sitting, but I was also in my mind still like, what is next? I was looking on Indeed for jobs. Nothing connected with me. And so it was a matter of really going back to the original passion of being a veterinary technician in patient care and not being a manager, but being a technician, working on the floor, having friends within your team, because, as a manager, you can't really be friends with the people you work with anymore. And I had connections with clinics. So I also knew that I had a clinic specifically that every time I came in for the laparoscopic stuff, like they knew I was an RVT and they're like, you should come work here, come fill in our ER shifts. So I was like, I could, maybe. But I reached out to them and I was like, you need some ER shifts filled. Like, I'm a technician, I can help you. And they did. I also had connections with SPCA that needed a technician to help kind of rebuild their spay neuter clinic, but I wasn't willing to commit to them for a full-time job. So kind of a scrambled story on, I did create an LLC so that I could be an independent contractor so that, I could just be paid in that way, but not commit to like SPCA, for example. And then I had an attorney write up that independent contractor agreement. So there was like just that legal part of what I was doing. So long story short, after I was doing that for a period of time, word of mouth gets out that I am doing this relief work and I have a lot more demands than supply of myself. And I reached out to like relief veterinarian companies. I did find a relief technician company on the West Coast, a woman that had been doing this for like 20 years. She's like the OG of this. So I was like, I've never even heard of technicians doing relief work. So between the business models of everybody that I spoke to, I kind of came to a sense that like, this is needed in our community. And there are other technicians like myself who maybe they had burned out and they moved on to a different career, but they might still have a passion for patient care. Or maybe they just want to work in a couple different environments to maybe preserve where they're at, because where they're at is burning them out. So I wanted to share that after I was doing it for so long. It was like about a year that I was doing it before I started recruiting other people. And that's where we started. So I had contractors I had 5 contractors, and that was maybe less than a year before I transitioned everyone to employees. And then COVID came along and everything. I had supply of everybody's demands. And at that point, I had like 42 employees.
Oh, wow.
In less than 3 years. And so it grew quickly. I had everything lined up. Like there was definitely some kind of kicking and screaming on like going back to being a manager is what this is.
I was about to ask.
And it's like, this is what I was avoiding all along. It's like, I don't want to go be a manager. I want to be a technician. But at the same time, there's this opportunity to really be a solution to technicians, but also like be a solution to clinics. If I can recruit, like I would say, I only hire people smarter than me. So recruiting people that are like highly skilled, highly experienced, like having the quality of technician that it takes to plug into any random clinic. I wanted to do that. So, and it was, yes, of course it was a risk. And yes, I borrowed a very uncomfortable amount of money to make it happen, to support myself, as I was building a business. But it was kind of like, if it goes down, it's just me, like me. Yeah, of course I was worried about disappointing technicians that worked for me, but also like me being the owner of this business, I didn't have any other dependents or anybody that was counting on me to provide for them. I was just providing for myself. And I know that no matter what I do, I will succeed at something. And I can be trained on anything. I can go back to just being a technician. I can get a job anywhere. So I had to let go of the fear. And I really just drove it forward.
I think that's so healthy to also know your strengths and your ability to be adaptable. And it's like, yes, I know this is a risk. I've calculated the risk, and that gives you enough confidence to do the hard thing, but also not put you into that fear zone.
As far as being a manager, even though they're my employees, the business model that I created was for the technicians to work freely and have the autonomy. I don't have any requirements for them to pick up a certain number of hours per week necessarily. And the whole platform is like, here's all the clinics that need help and the shifts that are needed. You choose them. You choose your schedule. You choose where you work. I'm here to support you in the sense of I've worked in 30 of these clinics. And, I will tell you, like, here's who your point of contact is, and here's what to expect with this doctor, and, give the expectations of each clinic, of course. But I'm not going to micromanage someone in the sense of how they're performing. Like, the expectation is set up front. Like, this is my expectation of how you work and what your work ethic is, that you show up on time, that you don't call out on shifts. And I mean, some of my employees might say I'm kind of cutthroat, but if you don't follow these, I let you go. And that's kind of my style, I guess, that in other situations or other jobs where I'm a supervisor, I have to go through a lot of layers to go through disciplinary actions and write-ups and those things. And with this dynamic, it's like either in or you're out. Like these expectations are clear and this is how it is.
Yeah, you've mentioned that the requirements for your technicians are quite high. Like these are people that have been in the field for a very long time, and the way you want things to run. You set the expectations very clearly. You communicate those up front, and you find the people that works with. You know your vision, and you find people to support that vision. And the fact that you allow that autonomy is you need somebody who can do that. You need somebody who can meet these high quality expectations and do it on their own. You don't want somebody who needs micromanaging or those kinds of things, because it's just not going to work well. That way, everybody knows how they work and it works well. And I thought it would be really good to ask you to explain the differences of being a locum veterinary technician and a locum veterinarian. We talked about this in our pre-call, and I think that's important to understand that the roles are different. And so being a locum in these different roles there's new things you kind of have to learn and figure out. So do you mind sharing that, like what you were learning when you were becoming a locum veterinary technician, and then how do you teach that to people who are interested in becoming more of a locum role?
Sure. I think for the doctors, and I could be wrong, it's just maybe my perspective. The doctors get to come in with their own style of medicine, right? They have their ways of treating or their ways of doing an exam, which is typically pretty standard, but then they just need to know kind of the software systems and, who's entering charges and the general workflow of the hospital. But as technicians, we have to adapt to every doctor's style and understand, what their expectations are as each individual doctor. And sometimes we're working with, 4 or 5 doctors at a time. And each of them have different ways of doing things, as well as the responsibilities of a technician are often front to back with the client communication, the intake, and collecting samples. Like, where's your stuff? What is your protocol for? Do you send this out to the lab? Do you do it in-house? Understanding that workflow and then entering those requisitions. Anesthesia is different kind of everywhere we go, like the protocols of pre-meds, induction, are you using ISO or SIVO, and the workflow again of how that moves through surgery and who your help is often variable in the sense of if you're getting like a kennel assistant that's helping you or another RVT. Yeah, I think there's a lot more challenges for a technician for sure to know kind of front to back. And I coach my technicians to, even if, you've worked in the field for 20 years and you have the skill, the experience, you've worked GP, emergency, specialty, you've done all the things. Our job is to come in and adapt. Our job is not to come in and say that you're doing it wrong, to be humble and to be able to come in and say, how do you do it here? Or, use the language of, I work in a lot of different places. Can you show me how you do it here? Just even in a sense of placing an IV catheter or taping. bandaging. Those things are particular in every single place, or the syringe or the needle size for vaccines. Those kind of things are things that we have to be mindful about. So that's how I coach my technicians to go in. And if there's nothing to do, find their cleaning checkoff list. Go walk dogs, clean cages. We're not above anyone just because we're RVTs and just because we're there as relief. So it's important for us to integrate as a team within their team. And there is sometimes I tell them the first shift is the hardest shift. There is a little bit of a mean girl vibe sometimes. So I'm like, who's this chick? Because they don't know us. Even if we have RVT behind our name, not every RVT is cut from the same cloth. And I explain that to them as well. Just keep offering your help. Just keep offering, what you can assist them with. And usually by the end of the day, after, you've demonstrated some tasks, they will trust you. And especially if you keep going back, like they're going to integrate with you. And that's changed over the years too, as relief technicians. I think it's become more acceptable and more mainstream than it used to be 5 years ago.
Very good point on the mean girls. I've had not a whole lot of conversations, maybe we just don't necessarily bring it out, but I have had conversations with different people in veterinary medicine where they talk about challenges of that. And my guess is that it may actually be harder on the technician side, especially if you are new coming in. And then the other thing I wanted to ask is, okay, so you're new to that particular hospital and you're coming in humble saying, help me understand how you prefer things done. But at the same time, you have very credentialed and experienced technicians. And some of the interesting things that I find with this is also they know what they're doing. So they may be able to help teach other technicians in a particular hospital on certain things. And I think this kind of comes into leadership skills, right? Like, how do you balance the coming in, being humble, saying, show me how you do things here. Let me learn and I will roll with the flow. And at the same time, still being able to take these very experienced people and bring additional value to the hospital, maybe by teaching them a new way of bandaging or supporting maybe younger technicians. Like, how do they learn how to find that balance? Because you get such great reviews for your technician.
I mean, it happens on the job, right? An example I can think of is one of my technicians. I think it was her second or third shift at this one hospital, and she's still struggling to be accepted. And then lo and behold, a code comes in and nobody really knows how to do CPR. And my technician completely ran that code and they were able to bring that dog back. But the fact that she was able to come in and lead that entire code and direct everyone on intubating, compressions, IV catheter, at the end of that code, everybody was bowing down to her oh, okay. And then from that point forward, there was respect. So I think it happens on a job where something comes in that nobody's had exposure to or nobody else knows how to handle. And my technicians have exposure to this. They know exactly how to handle it. And then they're working with the doctor on back and forth, and the doctor is seeking them out for advice, because they have that specialty or that emergency background. And so I think we earn it for sure, but it's inevitable that a case of some kind will come in that nobody in the hospital has been exposed to or knows how to handle. And we are able to teach that. We don't take over, but it's oh, here's, how I've seen this handled before. And here's my experience with this. Or have you ever tried this drug with that drug? It happens kind of naturally. And the initiative is there. So that work ethic, that initiative to be the first to step up and take on something challenging or take on anything really. You need rads on this dog, I'm on it. And you're going to get beautiful radiographs. So the quality shines through, I think, just on the job.
And it's vet med, so there's probably a lot of opportunities for that to happen.
Yeah, everywhere we go. Yep. Our secondary kind of layer to our company is that we have continuing education opportunities that we bring in-house. So I have 4 VTS on my team, 2 of them in anesthesia and 2 in emergency and critical care. And so we're also able to come in and do lunch and learn type lectures, or with anesthesia, if there's a team that needs like anesthesia training, I can pair my VTS with that team on their surgery schedule that day. And they just work alongside them with the cases and they coach them in real time on like, okay, your blood pressure is trending down. What are your steps for this? And we get a lot of great feedback for that. But the assistants and the technicians are really able to learn in real time. And then they also understand what they don't know. Like you don't know what you don't know. And that's, I think, largely like some of our younger technicians and assistants that they just haven't had the exposure yet in their career.
It's a good, humble place to be confident in what you do know and also realize you don't know everything.
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely be a forever learner and a forever student. I am definitely like, I learn so much from my technicians or, if I work on a shift and I come across something that either I haven't came across in a long time or I was having difficulty troubleshooting, like we have our group chat and our technicians do this too. Like we have a group chat, like they'll present a case, like I had this case and here's what I was doing, but here's what wasn't working. And it's nice that our team can come together and share with each other too and support each other in those cases.
Yeah. Oh goodness, what a great point. Because I'm also a firm believer in the importance of community when it comes to getting through the day on anything. Just being able to have that support group that you feel comfortable in expressing those questions and getting good feedback. And it actually kind of, I think, comes into a question that I have for you because you talked quite a bit about burnout there when you were talking about finding this new path for yourself. And then also some of the people coming in might be in similar situations. And so my question to you is, it's a big question, so feel free to take it any way you want, but especially when it comes to veterinary technicians, how do you see helping make the career of a veterinary technician sustainable, where we can keep people in veterinary medicine? And of course, I have a belief that can look a lot of different ways, but what are your thoughts around sustainability when it comes to veterinary technicians?
I always say, choose your stress. And also, what do you love? So some of my technicians, like Dave, he's my admin assistant. He's like my right-hand man that helps me out a lot. But when he inquired with me in 2021, and I asked him, I was like, what do you want to do? He's like, I want to teach for a living, so he wants to teach like CPR. He's our recover instructor. So he's a certified recover instructor and he wants to teach. And I was like, well, let's do that. Let's figure out a way to make that happen. So I try to provide, like, what are you looking for? Maybe you being a relief technician is just a transition and you're, trying to get feels for different types of clinics with different cultures so that you can find your forever home. I have created a job for myself where I am that support person of like, where do you want to go? What do you want to do? And how can I help you find it? And that's very empowering to me. Like that fills my soul to be able to help others in that sense or give them this career path that is an alternate, right? Where they can kind of do what they want. And I'm not like hovering over their shoulder because I trust them as mature, adult, professional, skilled, experienced technicians to go in and do the job that they signed up for. So I think there's a mental shift when you have your 9-to-5 job or whatever your job is, and that's your set schedule and that's what you have to do. And even though you come into relief work and you're still having to work the same number of hours that you would in a regular job, it's a mental shift. And I can speak for this for myself. It's a mental shift that you chose that. Like you made the choice that that's where you want to work, the hours you're working. So it's different in that sense of being able to kind of mentally, like I said, choose your stress in that way. Of going into a clinic and doing a great job with patient care. Everyone appreciates you because you're great. And you clock in and you clock out. If everywhere you go, there's going to be gossip or there's going to be somebody that's unhappy. And you're going to be exposed to unhappy people, but you can choose to be out of that. So I like that for relief work. I also like the variety of, going into different cultures and different teams and different workplaces. So that is how I chose my stress. And I think how a lot of my technicians are also like staying in the game. So really my company was created to kind of preserve these technicians as much as possible to stay in the industry, because we're losing great technicians because they're burning out and they're not emotionally or mentally able to cope in their work environments anymore. So two parts, I think it's on the individual to look within themselves. And if they're saying like everything around me is the problem, I would ask them to reconsider and look within themselves, right? On like, what is their unhappiness about themselves in their role? But yeah, I do think, as relief work, that is a alternate of sustaining and preserving yourself, especially if you're in a transition of not knowing where you want to go or what you want to do.
Yeah. And you mentioned it a little bit there, but it brought back our previous conversation is one of the things that you notice that is different about being a locum veterinary technician is that typically you hear more appreciation for what you do. And that is so huge. It is we come into this profession because we love what we do, but you need to be appreciated. It's huge. And I wanted to bring that back up, not only for people who are potentially looking for another outlet of being able to live out vet med, but also to the people who are in leadership positions or back to being another veterinary technician. Show appreciation. Like it starts with us that we can make a culture that is a little bit more sustainable. And I think that can go leaps and bounds for making us remember why we're here and to be excited to go to work every day. And yes, I think also feeling like you have more control over your work and how you contribute is also really big. I think that also aligns with a lot of the research and the data that we are seeing as we're trying to figure out what's going on and what can we do differently to make this a more sustainable career. And so also kind of using the experience that you've had, you mentioned you're able to go into a lot of different veterinary clinics. You're able to see a lot of different ways of working and things that are going on. I think that's a neat perspective of the profession. So very open-ended question. Is there anything that you would like to offer to people in veterinary medicine as kind of words of wisdom, things you've learned, or just something you would like to give back?
I think two parts. Some people I see leaving too soon. And maybe it is my generation where it was like, you stay committed to a job. And I know things have changed a lot, but I see so many resumes where they're like 3 months, 4 months, maybe 6 months at a job. And then there's several jobs within 5 years. And although, exposure to different cultures and different medicines, and I know like not everywhere is a good fit, I would say stay committed a little longer. I think we're not giving places a chance or that there is so much conversation around like, oh, this corporation or this management and everything's a problem. Everything's a problem. And it's been so endearing for me to create something that's part of the solution. And that's where I've like put a lot of my energy. It's like, wow, we talk so much about the problem and I really want to be a part of the solution. So I guess if I could give anything, it would be like, how can you be a part of the solution? Ooh. And ask yourself that, like, and maybe that's too deep. I think it's part of our empowerment abilities, right? As individuals, like, yes, we're in this as a team. Yes, we're in this as a whole industry. But if we continue to talk about the problem, that's what we'll have. What you give power to takes power over you. So I'm on that side of the fence of I'm going to give power to a solution and I want to help everybody be happy and be fulfilled. Like that means the clinics, that means the technicians, like we want to teach, we want to help you grow your teams. We want to, do all the things. I want my technicians to be happy and whatever their dreams are, I want to help them. Like, how can we get there?
I love that message because again, it's an empowering message, right? It's not a suck it up, buttercup. It's a step back and think about it. Like, what's your role here? What can you do to make things better? And yeah, there's going to be situations where you're like, I've run out of ideas. Like, maybe it is time to move on. But if we never step back and look at how we can play a role in the solution, then I think you're just going to take the problem with you, and so you're never going to find the right home because you're not willing to ask those questions and to consider those things. So I think that's super powerful. I really appreciate that message. It's a good reminder to all of us that we have that opportunity to take the power in that way. And so the last question is, what is something that you are very grateful for? And it can be just the first thing that comes to your mind.
I'm grateful for my health, for sure. My container, my body, my mental health, like every aspect of health that encompasses that. I'm grateful for that. Like, it gets me through every day, and I try my very best to not take that for granted. So I put a lot of effort into it, and it's, carrying me through everything that I do.
All right. So you get a bonus question at that one. What are some of the things that you do to take care of your overall health?
I think I have very good boundaries. And, as an entrepreneur, it's, I think, kind of a stereotype that like, oh, you work all hours of the day and night and, run yourself into the ground. And, when I did decide to like take this on as like, I want to move this into being an agency, I made a promise to myself that I would keep good boundaries. And even though when I first started, I worked a lot more hours than I had worked in my life, but it was choice, and it was what I was choosing to do. So it was not as draining on me. But as a business owner, I have good boundaries around like my weekends. My messages are not on, my notifications are not on my phone. There's a lot of times that I leave my phone at home or in my car and just not with me at all. I exercise often. I'm a gym rat. I love being outside. I ride my bike, and I eat very well. I think, sadly, veterinary medicine, we are exposed to a lot of junk. We love our clients and we love our practice managers that bring us pizza and donuts and all the things, but I stay away from those. And I'm not in the clinics that much anyway, but even when I always brought my own food because it's a gut-brain connection in your body, and we have to take care of our bodies to sustain our mental health, and it's all one big connection. So that has been how I take care of myself, knowing that, and also seeing the consequences of when I go outside of that and how I feel the next day, but the boundaries as well on the work and making sure that I have time off and time away from the work so that I have the energy to sustain this for a long time and be there for my employees the way they need to be supported.
I hope you enjoyed this fascinating veterinary story. We can make an impact in so many places. Check out the show notes for lots of resources. Please make sure you are subscribed on your podcast app, subscribe on the YouTube channel, and follow me on LinkedIn where I hang out the most. You can contact me on LinkedIn, on the website at vetlifereimagined.com, and you can text me. Find the link at the top of the show notes below that says, send us a text message. I want to thank our longtime sponsors, Fire Consulting and Will Hughes, who support the podcast over on our hosting platform, Buzzsprout. You can support the podcast too. Just check out the show notes for a link. And I hope to see you next time on Vet Life Reimagined.